Hey there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Bradley Hartmann. I'm excited to bring to you today my conversation with Mr. Tony Meza. Now, I've known Tony for, a long time. He has been a partner, a consultant, a voiceover artist on so much of our construction Spanish content and has really helped us develop a really unique construction-focused language training program, which is going to culminate here with our forthcoming Construction Spanish app that really has us diving deep into these small subsets of the Spanish language, all specific to construction. So we're talking about concrete specific Spanish. We're talking about glazing specific. We're talking about paint specific Spanish. And while we go deep down these rabbit holes on construction specific language, we always want to make sure we're bringing a little bit of pop culture as well. So we have a Major League Baseball construction Spanish. What does that mean? It means lots of baseball players in the major leagues have last names that are nouns or adjectives that we can use, that we already know, and we can use them on the job site. And we have a forthcoming mini episode with Tony where we're breaking down some Spanish language music that can be directly applicable to the business. Now, who is Tony Meza? Tony Meza has been in the safety industry for more than 2 decades. He has led the safety and risk control efforts at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, which I am biased. I'm in and out of there all the time, which I believe is one of the most efficient airports in the country. He's been involved in almost every major terminal expansion or renovation. And DFW Airport is the first in the country to use modular construction when expanding terminals. So in this episode, Tony gives us some context about leadership, about trust development, some major holidays, and how to incorporate some soccer or football knowledge in your leadership and management capabilities. As always, thank you for watching and listening. Please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Tony Meza. Mr. Tony Meza, welcome to the show.
What's up, man?
How you doing?
¿Cómo estás?
Bien, gracias. I'm excited to talk to you for a number of reasons. We've been working closely. Your incredible vocal cords are highlighted in our Construction Spanish app. We're going to talk about that later. I want to start here, though. Maybe can you help us, our audience members, think about maybe 2 different sides of this? We have some English speakers who are listening to the podcast and know part of their job is to lead folks whose dominant language is Spanish.
Right.
And yet, while they know some Spanish, they don't feel comfortable. They feel dumb. So instead of FOMO, fear of missing out, they have FOLD, fear of looking dumb. So maybe let's start there. And then I want you to kind of maybe transition and give us the perspective of some dominant Spanish speakers who know a little bit of English and why they might not want to speak English and how that impacts on the job. So let's start with our English speakers here. What would you say to folks who are listening who know a little bit of Spanish, but just don't want to look dumb? And then kind of what that impact is of their leadership and management on the job.
Sure. Yeah, it's always interesting, right? When you think about breaking down those barriers or just taking them down individually so that, people around you feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. I think that's always a challenge. Personally, I've dealt with that myself, many times. And I think it's just a matter of people understanding that we're all human beings, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's the first portion. And as a leader, understanding that you deal with people that are already apprehensive oftentimes, mm-hmm. right? Because of the fact that they lack the language, which leads to a lack of understanding, mm-hmm. right? I think one thing that could always help folks, whether you're a manager or you're just someone who wants to learn, right? I think if you humble yourself, right? I think sometimes we get too hung up on our titles and perhaps sometimes education levels. I think sometimes folks focus too much on that where we forget that at the end of the day, we're all human beings, mm-hmm. right? And just following what I was raised with the golden rule, right? Treat others as you would want to be treated. So I think if initially you put that on the forefront and you really try to understand those individuals, I think that goes a long way. I would say open yourself up to have them helping you.
Yeah.
Right? knowing and just vulnerability. Showing vulnerability goes a long way in terms of that audience, right?
Yeah.
Just that audience, I guess. Displaying vulnerability so that they know and recognize that, hey, this guy's trying to learn and at the same time teach us things, right? And I think understanding that that's going to be a two-way street essentially becomes important. So
yeah,
and
I think
that kind of gets to what we're aiming here.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I see most often is when there's this fear of looking dumb, we're on a job site, we know there's language, and we're going to talk about cultural barriers here in a minute. What do? We avoid eye contact. We try to look tough, and we just keep moving. And I've shared the story. It's happened so many times where we'll be talking with English-speaking construction managers on the job or maybe project executives, and we'll walk by the electricians, and it's like, what's up, Bob? How you doing, Jimmy? Terry, you get that done? All right, bro. And then we walk by these guys doing flat work. They're Hispanic guys. And it's just like silent. We put our head down and we walk by. And I'll just say, can we just pause here for a minute? It's as if we walked by, a bobcat or a lowboy, a piece of equipment that you would never acknowledge or recognize. And I said, why did you guys say hi to all the Sparkies over there? And then we just ignored all the guys, with the bull floats. Why? And we know why. Well, I don't really know what to say, feeling a little bit awkward. And when I looked at them, if I did, they put their eyes down. They're thinking, well, my guess is you can confirm or deny this. I think they're thinking, rarely does something good happen when I'm pouring concrete and I look up and there's 5 middle-aged white dudes walking by who look like authority.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put my head down. I'm going to work hard. So this happens so often. And I just say, hey, listen, man, even if you don't say hi, even if you don't say hola, which give them a thumbs up, give them some sort of recognition, maybe give a little context there. Or is there any other small phrases you might recommend to just help these folks when they do say hi to the plumbers and the Sparkies and some other folks? And then when you see guys who more than likely, Spanish might be their dominant language, there's a way to at least humanize that interaction.
Yeah, it's funny because I've experienced it firsthand, right? So it's not necessarily just a Hispanic American gap. I think it's just sometimes what a lot of the tradesmen see as a title because that's, perhaps a project manager or a superintendent, right? So they're seeing a title or a person of authority versus just a human being. So again, I've seen it myself, right, where we happen to be visiting a job site and you see a group of guys. I'm Mexican, they're Mexican, and sometimes they put their heads down, right, until I take the initiative to just simply say, hola, don, ¿cómo está? Something like that. Hola, viejo. Yeah. Right? And I may not know them, personally, but just giving them those little cues, right, that, hey, this guy perhaps understands some of our culture, right? Mm-hmm. And then just with a smile, and it's crazy what magic that does, because the second you do that, it's like you see this little kind of smirk in their face, right? And they're like, okay, I can take a breath now,
Yeah.
And it all goes away. So oftentimes just a simple, ¿cómo está, don? Right? And don, right, we all think of like the Don, right, in Italian, right? Or recently for some of the, younger viewers, Don Omar, right, the reggaeton guy. But Don is just a phrase
no
of
idea
respect.
Who that is, but
you don't know who Don Omar is?
No, I know you're hip, though.
On,
you connect with the younger audience. That's good. That's why we got you on. Well, you also said,
sure.
Hola, viejo.
Hola, viejo. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so viejo is old man.
Correct.
Right? But again, I think it's a matter of when we talk about back to learning, right? Now the Latino spectrum in construction is so wide.
Yeah.
We're not just thinking Mexican, right? I mean, we've got people from South America,
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, while that may work for some, it may not be well received by many because of that, right? But part of the task, right, that we have as leaders is simply recognizing your audience. All right, so I know, like you said, right, maybe my concrete finishers are perhaps, 80% Mexican. So I may be okay saying hola viejo, right?
Yeah.
And again, folks that have heard that before understand that you typically say that with respect, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with context too, right? If I say, este viejo, then it's more like, this old man, right? Versus hola viejo, just out of respect, right?
Yeah.
Or hola don, right? And again, it's crazy what that does in terms of opening up, that opportunity to just talk to the guys, right?
Yep.
Like you said, so it may not necessarily be that you have to know their name, right? Like, hey, Rick, Sparkies or something, right? But hey, hola don, right? That alone is enough for you to indicate to them, hey, I'm here.
Yeah,
I just want to say hi. I see you.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, what you do. So,
I found a lot of success anecdotally with just "Que onda?" Now, I'm a tall, skinny ginger walking out there, and then say "Que onda?" and then I say
that alone right there gets you bonuses, man. The fact that you're a taller ginger and trying.
Well, and I see that same smirk, but a lot of times they have to look at each other like, did you just hear what I hear? Like, and I'm looking at them like,
Yeah.
what's up, dudes? What are we doing here, right? And then I'll say, te puedo ayudar, right? Can I help you, right? Necesitas algo? Do you need anything? Now, normally, this is just ongoing, sustained silence, which I let just set in for a minute. And then all of a sudden, somebody will say something like, I'm going to stand here as long as it's awkward. Like,
I think it's kind of shock,
Yes.
This is that shocking moment where we're like, oh, wasn't expecting that.
And then what happens is word gets around real quick. And they're like, hey, man, you see this güero? He speaks some Spanish. Be ready. And then all of a sudden, everybody knows. And then they'll see you come in and you see these kind of these smiles like, all right, this guy. Supposedly.
Again, that's all it takes, man.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of being vulnerable, right? And the less you think about it, I think the easier it becomes, right?
Right.
I think back when you share your first-hand experience, I think back of a gentleman I met a few years ago. He used to be the director for a pretty large construction company. I mean, he's white as he can be, dude. I mean, white man's from I think he was from Alabama. so that's pretty white. But
I was going to say North Dakota. I'm like, Alabama. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
But this man got it. And I mean, heck, I would say within that organization, safely say 80% Hispanic, right? And he would walk up to job sites and he would always do this hand gesture. Are we allowed to do hand gestures?
Do whatever you want. Yeah.
All right, so the guy shows up to, he's got his vest on. And he's like, yeah, that way. Right? He would do that.
Yeah. Yes.
And that alone,
Yes.
man. And then granted, the guy spoke very little Spanish. Mm-hmm. But that alone, right, gave the signal to the guys that, hey, I'm here for you. Mm-hmm. I see you. I'm trying to learn about you, right?
Yep.
So I think when you ask, what are the phrases, right? I think it's just a matter sometimes of trial and error.
Yeah.
Right? And again, I know that falls back into being apprehensive. Oh, what if I offend somebody, right? I think ultimately the majority of the guys out there are going to know that you're trying.
Yep.
Right? And as long as you do it with that good intent and no ill behind, I think it's safe to say you're going to be safe, right?
Yeah. Well, we introduced this phrase early on in all our kind of 6-week construction Spanish classes, which is estoy tratando de aprender español, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if I just come out and say, oh, estoy tratando de aprender español, it sounds a little aggressive. We break it down. In about under 4 minutes, I can teach you these different parts. But when you get that comfortability walking on the job site and say, momentito, estoy tratando de aprender español. ¿Cómo se dice? Right. I'm trying to learn Spanish. What do you call? And then you just point to something. What I have found, and thousands of other people have found, is people want to help you. They're like, really? You're one of these guys who wants to learn my language? Mm-hmm. Hey, I will help you. And then all of a sudden, they're giving you ideas. They're helping you with pronunciation.
You're getting lunch.
They will bring, their wives are now making you lunch. They're going to bring that
lunch.
In.
That's right.
It just changes the game. Before we go on, let me ask you this idea. From a leadership perspective, what advice do you have for folks who struggle with this whole idea of being vulnerable? I think it's easy to say, as a leader, hey, we have to be vulnerable first before we're asking other people. Yes. Be vulnerable? Sure. You go first. Have you been able to help people understand the power of being vulnerable? And I don't want to say it's a weakness, but there's an element of taking your guard down. Anything that has worked for you and among other leaders you've seen and how they lead?
I 100% agree with you when you say that it's much easier to say it than to do it, right? In my own little world and the professionals that I've dealt with, I've been pretty lucky that the majority of them either have been around long enough to get it, and even some of the younger guys, right? They tend to be a little more forward thinking, so they're not necessarily so dug into a specific way of doing things. So they're willing to learn and adapt, right? In terms of a suggestion, what has worked, it's not easy for everyone. I tell you, when I first joined this particular role that I have now, I think it was within the first day, I got there, and one of the senior loss prevention guys for one of the contractors, the first thing he says, he goes, "Oh, so you're the enemy." When I introduced myself, I told him what my responsibility was.
Yeah.
And I had a hard time. I think I tend to read people quite well, but I had a hard time really understanding if he was joking or he was being real, right? And so at that moment...
Or both.
Yeah, or maybe a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
And it just took time, right? It's not something that you just grasp overnight, right? And I think as we worked together and we developed our relationship, he understood that I was only there to be a support mechanism for him, right? Instead of someone who was just trying to get you in trouble, right? So a strategy or an approach to how to be vulnerable, that's a hard one. That's a hard one, man. I tell my kids, right? We all put our pants one leg at a time.
Yep.
And that's what we got to remember, right?
Yeah.
Unless you jump into them, I want to find out what you're at. How you do that, right? But at the end of the day, that's what makes us vulnerable, that we're human beings. That's...
Well, you mentioned something there that just has me thinking. It's like, I think we all understand trust and relationships to a degree take time. What I have found is if you can even begin to think about being vulnerable, and at least to the point where you state your intentions, where you might say, "Oh, you're the enemy." Say, "Hey, I don't know what your experience is in the past. I hope you're going to find with me, though, that I'm direct, I'm candid. And sooner or later, every relationship's going to have some friction. We're going to have that too. But I'm going to tell you, dude, I'm a team player. I grew up playing team sports, like whatever, right? Give some sort of context to who you are. Say, my intent is that you and I, on a long enough timeline, are really going to trust each other and be transparent. And hopefully I want to be useful to whatever aims you have, right? But I think even just saying, like the childlike version of, I want to be friends with you. Why? Yeah. Because teams work better when we try to be friendly, if not friends. But I think just making that intent clear, because otherwise you can have a relationship that go on for way too long. And you're still like, I don't know about this guy, Meza.
No, I agree.
All right, watching the time here, I want to ask you about two somewhat related things here. First of all, let's talk about football. Let's talk about soccer. All right. So recently, the Copa America.
Are we talking football, Americano?
Dude, I'm talking
soccer?
to you.
Football.
Dude. I'm knowing my audience, bro.
Football.
Come on, give me some credit here. We are talking about football. So Copa America, that recently wrapped up. 2026. So we got some time. If you're oblivious to this whole thing called the World Cup, La Copa Mundial, we have time to prepare for that. What might intelligent, different companies that employ lots of Hispanics be thinking about when it comes to these really global, high visibility in Hispanic communities, soccer tournaments? Because what I often hear, this was not too long ago, but when last World Cup was coming around, we were talking to a client, they do concrete, 90% of their workforce is Hispanic. The vast majority of those, probably 90+% are from Mexico. There's this huge Mexico match coming up. And I said, what are you guys planning for that? And he's like, I'm sorry, what's this? I said, the World Cup. He's like, yeah. He's like, I know that's coming up. I'm like, it's not coming up, it's here. And he said, I'm going to be honest, we haven't thought a minute about that. Should we? And I said, well, whether you like this or not, it's like, just imagine the Super Bowl was on a random Tuesday at noon. Do you think you might be thinking about it or tuning into it? He said, yes. I said, so what advice might you have? Understanding we got work to do. It's busy. But there's something that's really meaningful to a large group of people on our job site that is often oblivious to the leaders of those job sites.
Well, I know what I'm going to be doing. Just watching those games.
Right. One way or another.
So my productivity is going to be down, right?
Yeah.
No. So obviously, joke aside, in our industry, I've actually been thinking about this myself, right? But I think when we consider the fact that a lot of the things that we do in construction are, safety sensitive tasks, right? It's really hard to balance that because, for many individuals in our industry, this is important. It's a lifestyle. I love it. I grew up playing soccer. It's one of the things that I've raised my kids, and anytime we get an opportunity, it's a, for us, right?
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of families and individuals that feel that way. It's a bonding experience, right? cheer for the same team and, feel a little victory, something that's just a feel-good moment, right? And I think from the operational aspect, trying to balance that is definitely a hard task, right? Yep. Ideally, hey, place the TV somewhere, let the guys watch it, right? No, that's not going to happen, Yeah. And of course, while we are aware of the fact that a lot of the, tradesmen often, wear their ear pods and, companies and projects really kind of aren't too keen to that. Mm-hmm. I understand why as well, right? I would say, hey, maybe the following day on your morning huddles, give the guys an update.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you guys think about the group stage, yesterday and some of the games? Mm-hmm. In case you didn't know, here's some of the scores, That probably the easiest, lightest approach without necessarily impacting production, considering the fact that a lot of those games are going to happen during business hours.
They are, yeah.
Man, I don't know. Perhaps consider. And again, I know for many that are listening, right, it's going to be, man, this guy lives in Cloud 9 or something, right? But perhaps considering, on some of those high-profile games, mm-hmm. right, scheduling a small break. Right. The water breaks, the cool-down breaks. It's summertime. It's going to be summertime. So some of those cooling breaks that you afford to give those guys, hey, get a chance to tune in to 15 minutes of the match or whatever that might be, Yeah. Maybe their lunchtime, try to plan that out. And again, during summer, most of your concrete pours are happening at night, right? So that also opens for some of these trades. So actually maybe take advantage of watching some of the games. But
well, you kind of joked about like, oh, it's not going to happen. Wheeling in a TV for it. We had 2 different clients, different parts of the country, do just that. And they did. It was oppressively hot. They're already doing night pours. And they said, when's the game? And basically what they did is they went to the group ahead of time and say, hey, we know this is coming up. And all of a sudden the guys were like, this is a conversation we've never had with management before. You're aware of this. And they said, let's put our heads together. How can we figure out a way? So they did. They had an extended break, wheeled in a TV for it. And there was this agreement that, hey, these are the trade-offs we're going to make. Are you excited about that? Do you want to do it? And overwhelmingly, the answer was yes. And that's exactly what they did. The other one was during the day, but it was like in the afternoon. So maybe it was like 2 or 3. So they wheeled in TVs and they said, everybody on the site is going to agree. No one's going to give any updates, like code of silence here. So no one knows the updates. And then they taped it. So then they got off and then they just rolled in TVs and they had some food and like they made an event out of this. But
that's neat.
You talk to these guys who, dude, these guys are dying to watch every game where Mexico is representing their nation and playing. And it's this admission that, hey, I've thought about this. Hey, it's not a perfect world. We got to get work done. However, it's important to you. Therefore, it's important to me. Let's talk about options, right?
Yeah, no. I think as an employee, right, as a team, when you do that and you display that, you just increase your loyalty, mm-hmm. Of your employees because, again, they recognize the fact that, hey, these guys consider us outside of just, coming here and operate a drill or whatever it is that we do, right? So seeing them as valued employees and human beings and understanding, again, reducing those cultural gaps, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, I think that's neat that companies are forward thinking like that, man. That's cool. So.
Holidays. What may be the top 1, 2, 3 holidays that are very important to the Hispanic demographic that largely gringos like myself and others might be somewhat oblivious to? Cinco de Mayo, not a problem. I think us gringos celebrate that more than Mexicans do these days. What might be something on our radar that will say, number 1, it's for $10 you can get a calendar and it'll literally have all of them listed out there. So let's say that's super easy. You can solve that problem with Amazon, no problem. What other key holidays might be important to Hispanics that might be oblivious to other folks?
So again, I joked about the Cinco de Mayo thing, right? But definitely the Independence Days, right? Because it doesn't all fall the same for different countries, mm-hmm. right? And again, I briefly touched upon this, the fact that you've got folks from South America, right? Colombia, Venezuela, mm-hmm. Costa Rica, they don't all celebrate Independence Day the same time as Mexico. And again, September is actual, Mexican independence, right? Versus May. No. So I think, again, understanding that, of course, always Dia del Padre, Father's Day, right? Not everyone celebrates it on the exact same day. Oddly enough, right? You would think everyone kind of does the whole May thing, or June, sorry. I was thinking Mother's Day. But Mother's Day, those are kind of the key ones, right? Okay. Again, just considering the fact that culturally, Hispanics are so family-driven, mm-hmm. right? and they always want to honor those in their family that have perhaps gone through hardships or sacrificed a lot for them to be where they're at, right? I mean, to me, it's always an honor calling my dad and be like, hey, man, love you, kind of thing, Same thing for mom, right? So those days are important for many, and not just for the Mexican culture, but Dia del Muerto, right? That's another one that when you look at it from that aspect, culturally, in terms of holidays, I think we're pretty dialed in and in tune with the important ones.
Well, appreciate you, man. So we're going to do a little addendum to this one. So to follow this episode,
it's always a surprise with you, man. Come on.
Always got to be trying new stuff. You know that. We are going to be taking one of, I don't want to say it's my number one. It's not. It's in my top 5 all-time favorite Spanish language songs.
Okay.
We're going to be breaking it down, and we're going to be extracting some of these key phrases for use on the job site. That's what's coming next. So,
okay. Interesting.
But we're going to close out for here now. Mr. Tony Meza, muchísimas gracias, güey.
Gracias, güero. Gracias. It's always fun, man, working with you. It always just brings a different mindset. So I always look forward to working anytime I can with you, and appreciate you reaching out.
You got it. And for any of you who have gone or will be going through the Construction Spanish app, where we really drill down into concrete Spanish and glazing Spanish and really get in the niches, these nooks and crannies of the Spanish language, this is the man's voice you'll hear. So you're the one. You're the guy. So appreciate you lending your vocal talents to the Construction Spanish app. Tony Meza, gracias. All right, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Tony Meza. We're excited to put out his voice that is part of our Construction Spanish app, which really dives into these micro fluency topics specific to construction. So you're going to hear his voice in that app. And our goal with the app and this conversation and everything in general that we do with the Hispanic demographic is to help us lead and manage more effectively. So hopefully you can see the talent on your job site in a slightly different light to build better and more profitably. So we're going to close out like we always do. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.